A train travels across the American landscape in the year 1928. Inside one of the cars, a young man sits alone by the window. His name is Walt Disney, and he is 37 years old. He looks tired, and his eyes are heavy with worry. He has just come from a very difficult meeting in New York City where he lost almost everything he had worked for. He had a character he loved deeply, a rabbit named Oswald. But during that meeting, Walt discovered that he did not own the rights to his own creation. His business partners took the character and his best artists away from him. He was left with nothing but his pride and a return ticket to California. The world seemed very dark on that long train ride back home. Success often hides behind the face of failure. Walt knew that if he returned to Hollywood empty-handed, his studio would have to close. He needed a new idea, and he needed it before the train reached the station. He took out a small notebook and a pencil. His hands were shaking slightly from the stress, but he began to draw. He was looking for something new and simple. He started drawing a small creature with round ears and a long tail. At first, it was just a few circles on a white page. He wanted this character to be different from the rabbit he had lost. It needed to be smaller, faster, and more full of life. This was not just a drawing, it was his last hope to save his career and his big dreams. This moment on the train changed the history of entertainment forever. Most people would have given up after losing their business and their team. But Walt used his pain to fuel his creativity. He understood that a closed door often leads to a new path if you are brave enough to look for it. It is important to look at how we react when things go wrong. Before we continue with this incredible journey, we would love to hear from you. People from all over the world watch these stories of great leaders and creators. Where are you listening from today? Please share your city or country in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about vision and courage, please subscribe to join our community. Your support helps us tell more stories like this. Walt looked at the sketch on his lap as the train moved west. He decided to call the character Mortimer Mouse. It was a strong name, but his wife, Lillian, did not like it at all. She told him the name sounded too formal and cold for a little mouse. She suggested a friendlier name that felt more like a neighbor. She suggested the name Mickey, and Walt agreed. Mickey Mouse was born in a moment of total desperation. He was a simple character, but he had a very big heart. Walt wanted him to be an underdog, someone who faces big problems with a smile and a positive attitude. This was a reflection of Walt's own life at that time. He was a small man fighting against big companies, and he poured his feelings into ink. The train moved closer to Los Angeles, and Walt felt a new energy in his body. He was no longer the man who had lost his business. He was now the man who owned a mouse. This shift in mindset is what separates winners from everyone else. He did not focus on what was stolen from him. Instead, he focused on what he could build next with his own two hands. When he finally stepped off the train, he told his brother Roy that everything was fine. He did not talk about the loss of Oswald the rabbit. He showed Roy the small sketch of the mouse instead. He told his brother that they were going to start over from the beginning. This was the start of an empire that would eventually cover the entire planet, starting with one piece of paper. To understand where Walt got his strength, we must look back at his childhood. Life was not easy for him in the early years. He grew up in the cold winters of the American Midwest. His father was a very strict man who believed in hard work and constant discipline. There was very little time for play or toys. This difficult environment shaped how Walt viewed the world. As a young boy in Kansas City, Walt had a very tough job. He was a paperboy, delivering newspapers in the early morning hours. He had to wake up at 3 in the morning every single day, regardless of the weather. Sometimes the snow was so deep that he would fall and cry from the cold. But he always finished his route before going to school for the day. This period of his life taught him that nothing comes for free. He learned that if you want something, you have to work harder than everyone else. While other children were sleeping, Walt was walking through the frozen streets. He began to draw to escape the reality of his hard life. Drawing was his way of creating a world where things were beautiful and happy, unlike his daily routine. The discipline he learned as a paperboy stayed with him forever. He realized that a person can survive almost anything if they have a goal. Even when his hands were frozen, he kept moving. This is a lesson many successful adults learn early. Strength is not something you are born with. It is something you build through years of doing things that are difficult and uncomfortable. When he became a young man, he tried to start his first real business in Kansas City. He called it Laugh O Grams. He wanted to make short cartoons for local theaters. He was very talented, but he was not very good with money yet. He spent everything he had on the best equipment and the best artists. He wanted everything to be perfect, but the business eventually failed completely. There was a time when Walt was so poor that he lived in his office. He had no money for food and had to wash himself in the public train station. He felt the heavy weight of shame because he could not pay his debts. His first business went bankrupt, and he lost everything he owned. To many people, this would have been the end of their professional journey. Failure is a very lonely experience. Walt felt like he had let everyone down. But he did not let the failure define who he was. He looked at his empty office and realized that his talent was still there. Money can disappear, but your skills and your vision remain inside you. He decided that he needed to go where the real movie business was happening, Hollywood. He sold his camera to buy a train ticket to California. He left Kansas City with a sense of loss, but also a sense of freedom. He had nothing left to lose, which made him very dangerous to his competitors. When a man has nothing but a dream, he is willing to take risks that others would never consider. He was heading toward the unknown with confidence. He arrived in Los Angeles with a small cardboard suitcase and only $40 in his pocket. He did not have a job or a place to live. He stayed with his uncle and began to visit the movie studios every day. He wanted to be a director, but no one would hire him. He was just another young man with an empty pocket and a big ego. This move shows us a powerful lesson about life. Sometimes you have to lead your current environment to find your true success. Kansas City was the place where he learned to work, but Hollywood was the place where he could grow. He changed his location to change his future. He was willing to be a small fish in a very big ocean just to have a chance. He lived in a small room and ate very little food during those first months. He was often hungry, but his mind was always busy. He decided that if no one would hire him, he would start his own studio again. He convinced his brother Roy to help him. Roy was the stable one, and Walt was the dreamer. Together, they formed the Disney Brothers Studio. His hunger was not just for food, it was a hunger for achievement. He was willing to suffer in the present moment because he believed in the future. He spent his nights drawing and his days trying to sell his work. This period of struggle was necessary. It built the foundation for everything that was coming. He was ready to prove that he belonged in the world of movies. By the late 1920s, the movie world was changing very quickly. Silent films were the standard, but technology was moving forward. Walt saw a movie with sound and realized that the future of animation was about to change. He knew that if his new character, Mickey Mouse, could talk and move to music, it would be a revolution. He decided to take a very big risk. The project was a short film called Steamboat Willie. Walt wanted the sound to match the actions of the mouse perfectly. This was very difficult to do at the time. There were no computers to help. Everything had to be done by hand and timed with a stopwatch. He spent months trying to get the rhythm of the music to match the movement of the drawings on the screen. He hired a professional orchestra to record the music. But in the first session, the timing was wrong. The music did not match the animation. It was a disaster, and Walt lost a lot of money in just one day. He had to sell his car to pay for a second recording session. He was putting all his resources into a few minutes of film that might not work. During a second attempt, he used a moving line on the screen to help the conductor keep the beat. This simple idea worked perfectly. The sound and the picture finally became one. Walt felt a thrill when he saw his mouse dancing to the music. He knew he had something that no one else in the world had. He was holding the future of entertainment in his hands. But having a great product is only half the battle. He needed to find a distributor who would put the film in theaters. He traveled to New York to show the film to the big studio bosses. Most of them laughed at him. They told him that a cartoon with sound was just a toy. They thought audiences would find the noise of a talking mouse annoying and strange. The rejection was constant and painful. Walt went from office to office, carrying his heavy film cans. He was told no dozens of times. Some people told him he was wasting his time and should go back to Kansas City. But Walt had a thick skin. He believed in Mickey Mouse more than he believed in the opinions of the experts in the big offices. Finally, a small theater owner agreed to show Steamboat Willie before a main movie. It was a tiny chance, but it was all Walt needed. On the night of the premiere, he stood at the back of the theater. He was sweating and nervous. He watched the faces of the people in the dark. He wondered if they would laugh or if they would stay silent. The moment the music started, the audience began to smile. When Mickey Mouse started to whistle, the theater filled with laughter. People had never seen anything like it. The drawings felt alive because they were making noise. It was a magical experience for the crowd. By the end of the film, the audience was cheering. Walt knew right then that his life would never be the same again. The success was immediate and massive. Mickey Mouse became a global star almost overnight. Newspapers wrote about the little mouse that could talk. Walt was finally making money and his studio began to grow. He hired more artists and moved to a bigger building. But he did not stop to celebrate for long. He was already thinking about the next step in his creative journey. He understood that fame is temporary unless you keep improving. He pushed his artists to make the drawings more realistic. He wanted the characters to have real emotions and personalities. He created a series of films called Silly Symphonies to experiment with new techniques. He was not just making cartoons anymore, he was trying to create a new form of art that people would respect. Walt became a leader who was famous for his high standards. He would often walk through the studio and look at the work on the desks. If he did not like something, he would tell the artist to start over. He was looking for perfection. Some people found him difficult to work for, but they all respected his vision. He wanted Disney to mean quality in every language. The example and takeaway here is clear. Success came because Walt combined technology with a great story. He didn't just use sound because it was new, he used it to make his character feel more human. The lesson for us is to always look for ways to improve our work using the tools of our time. Never be satisfied with what you did yesterday. By the mid-1930s, Walt Disney was a household name. He had won several awards and was a very wealthy man. However, his mind was restless. He felt that short cartoons were not enough. He had a dream that was much bigger and much more dangerous. He wanted to do something that everyone said was impossible. He wanted to make a full-length movie out of drawings. The idea for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was born from Walt's desire to tell a deeper story. At that time, most people thought cartoons were only for kids to watch for a few minutes. They believed that a 90-minute movie made of drawings would hurt people's eyes. The industry experts were sure that the audience would get bored and leave the theater long before the end. The Hollywood press began to call the project Disney's Folly. They predicted it would be the biggest failure in the history of cinema. Even Walt's brother Roy, who handled the money, was terrified. He told Walt that the project would cost too much and could destroy everything they had built. His wife Lillian also had doubts. She didn't think adults would care about a fairy tale. Walt did not listen to the critics. He spent 3 years and a huge amount of money on the film. He had to train his artists to draw humans in a way that looked natural. They studied how real people moved and how light hit different surfaces. The cost of the movie grew from $250,000 to nearly $1.5 million. It was a staggering amount of money for that era. To pay for the movie, Walt had to borrow more money from the bank. The bankers were skeptical and wanted to see what he was doing. Walt had to sit with a powerful banker and show him parts of the unfinished film. He acted out the roles of the dwarves himself to explain the story. He was performing for the survival of his company. The pressure was incredible. Walt worked long hours, often sleeping at the studio. He was a man possessed by a vision that only he could see clearly. He knew that if Snow White failed, he would lose his studio, his house, and his reputation. He was gambling everything he had on the idea that people would cry for a drawing of a girl. The emotional weight of this period was heavy. Walt became very stressed and his health suffered. But he stayed focused on the details. He wanted the forest to look scary and the dwarfs to have individual souls. He was not just making a movie, he was creating a world. This level of dedication is rare, but it is what creates masterpieces that last for generations. Finally, in December 1937, the movie was ready. The premiere was held at the Carthay Circle Theater in Los Angeles. All the famous movie stars were there. Walt sat in the audience holding his breath. He was terrified that the audience would laugh at the emotional scenes. He watched the screen carefully, waiting for the first reaction from the crowd. During the scene where Snow White appears to be dead, something amazing happened. Walt looked around and saw that the famous movie stars were actually crying. They were not looking at drawings, they were feeling real sadness for a character. The film was a masterpiece of storytelling. When the movie ended, the entire audience stood up and cheered for several minutes. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs became the highest-grossing film of all time for a while. It earned enough money for Walt to build a brand new, modern studio in Burbank. He had proven everyone wrong. His folly became his greatest victory. This success changed the movie industry forever. It showed that animation could be a serious art form for adults as well as children. The mindset lesson here is about ignoring the noise of the crowd. If Walt had listened to the experts, he would have stayed small. He understood that being the first to do something is always scary, but that is where the greatest rewards are found. He trusted his intuition over the fears of others. He knew that quality always finds an audience eventually. After the success of Snow White, Disney produced more classics like Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Bambi. But then, the Second World War started. The international market for movies disappeared, and the studio struggled again. Walt had to make films for the government to keep the lights on. It was a very difficult time, and for several years, the creative fire seemed to be fading. Success is never a straight line. Even after building an empire, Walt faced many moments of doubt. He felt that he was repeating himself. He wanted a new challenge, something that existed in the real world, not just on a screen. He began to think about a place where parents and children could have fun together in a safe, clean environment. This idea came to him while he was sitting on a park bench watching his daughters play. He noticed that the local parks were often dirty and the adults had nothing to do. He imagined a place that was like a movie set you could walk through. He wanted to build a theme park that was different from anything else in existence. Once again, the people around him thought he was losing his mind. His brother Roy refused to use the company's money for a park. The banks thought the idea was too risky. Theme parks at that time were seen as cheap and dangerous places. No one believed a permanent park could be profitable. Walt had to find the money on his own. He was so determined that he borrowed money against his own life insurance policy. He sold his vacation home. He even started a new company just to design the park. He was nearly 60 years old, but he had the energy of a teenager. He found a large orange grove in Anaheim, California, and began to turn the dirt into a dream. To get the rest of the money, Walt did something very clever. He made a deal with a television network. He agreed to host a weekly show if they would invest in his park. This was the beginning of the Disneyland television show. It allowed Walt to talk directly to the public. He showed them the models of the park and made them excited before it even opened. The construction of Disneyland was a race against time. Walt was there every day, checking the buildings and the rides. He wanted everything to look perfect. He even had a small secret apartment built above the fire station on Main Street. He would stay there so he could watch the work during the night. He was deeply involved in every single detail. The concrete example here is the attention to detail. Walt made sure that the trash cans were placed a specific number of steps apart. He wanted the castle to look taller than it actually was, so he used a technique called forced perspective. He understood that the tiny details are what make an experience feel like magic to a visitor. Opening day was July 17, 1955. It was a disaster that became known as Black Sunday. The weather was extremely hot, and the asphalt on the ground was still soft. Women's shoes got stuck in the street. There were too many people because of counterfeit tickets. The rides broke down, and the water fountains didn't work. It looked like a total failure. The press wrote terrible things the next morning. They said Disneyland was a nightmare. But Walt did not panic. He spent the next few weeks fixing every problem. He listened to the complaints and made changes immediately. He realized that a park is never finished. It is something that grows and evolves. Within a few months, the park was a huge success. Disneyland changed the way the world looked at vacations. It was more than a park. It was an emotional experience. People felt happy and safe there. Walt had created a place where the outside world did not exist for a few hours. This was his gift to the world, a place of pure imagination and joy that people loved. The success of the park made the Disney company more powerful than ever. Walt was now a billionaire, but he didn't care about the money. He used the profits to start even bigger projects. He was always looking toward the future. He began to dream of a place that could help people live better lives through technology and planning. He started buying land in Florida for a second, even larger park. He kept the project a secret for a long time by using different company names to buy the land. He didn't want the prices to go up. He had a vision for something he called Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. He wanted to build a real city. Walt believed that modern cities were poorly designed. He wanted Epcot to be a place where there was no traffic or pollution. He wanted to use the latest science to create a perfect society. This shows his transition from an entertainer to a visionary leader who wanted to solve real-world problems. He was always thinking 20 years ahead of everyone else. However, time was running out. Walt had been a heavy smoker for most of his life. In late 1966, he felt very ill. He went to the hospital and discovered he had lung cancer. Even in his hospital bed, he was looking at the ceiling and pointing to where the buildings of his new Florida park should go. He never stopped dreaming. Walt Disney passed away on December 15, 1966. The world went into mourning. Millions of people felt like they had lost a member of their own family. He was a man who had brought so much light into the world. But the company he built faced a huge question. Could it survive without the man who started it all? His brother Roy, who was planning to retire, decided to stay. He wanted to make sure Walt's final dream in Florida was completed. He worked tirelessly for 5 years to build Walt Disney World. When it opened in 1971, Roy insisted that it be called Walt Disney World so that everyone would remember the name of the man behind it. The legacy of Walt Disney is not just about movies or parks. It is about a specific way of thinking. He believed that if you can dream it, you can do it. This philosophy is built into the culture of the company. It is the idea that imagination is the most valuable resource a human being possesses. It is a spirit of constant improvement. Today, the Disney name is a global language. It is recognized in every corner of the earth. From a small sketch on a train to a multi-billion-dollar empire, the journey is a testament to the power of a single idea. It shows that one person with enough passion can truly change the way the world feels and thinks. We can learn so much from his life. He was a man who failed many times. He was a man who was told no more than yes. But he never let the no stop him. He used rejection as a tool to sharpen his vision. He understood that the path to a great life is paved with difficulties and risks. Think about the times you have faced a setback in your own life. Perhaps you lost a job or a project failed. Walt's story reminds us that these moments are not the end. They are often the beginning of something much bigger if you have the courage to keep moving. Failure is just information you use to do better next time. He also showed us the importance of quality. In a world that often looks for the cheapest and fastest way to do things, Walt chose the best way. He knew that people will always recognize and pay for excellence. Whether you are drawing a mouse or building a city, do it with everything you have. The transformation of Walt Disney is complete. He started as a poor boy in the snow and ended as a legend. He proved that the American dream is possible through work, vision, and a refusal to give up. His story is a documentary of human potential. It is a story of what happens when we decide to follow our heart. The company today owns some of the biggest characters in history. But if you walk through the parks, you will still see the small silhouette of a mouse with round ears. It is a constant reminder of the humble beginnings of the company. It reminds us that everything big starts small. A mountain is just a collection of small stones. Walt once said, "I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse." This sentence carries a lot of weight. It is a message of humility. No matter how successful we become, we must remember the simple idea that got us there. We must stay connected to our original passion. As we look at his life, we see a man who was deeply human. He was not a perfect person, but he was a persistent person. He had a temper, he had fears, and he had moments of exhaustion. but he chose to act despite those things. This is what true maturity looks like, moving forward even when you are afraid. The impact he had on the world is hard to measure. He changed how we spend our time with our families. He changed how we tell stories. He created a sense of wonder that still exists today. Every time a child smiles at a character, Walt's spirit is alive. Every time an adult feels like a kid again, his vision succeeds. The transition from a man with a pencil to a world of magic was not an accident. It was the result of thousands of small decisions made every day. It was the result of a man who refused to be mediocre. He demanded the best from himself and the best from those around him. This is the mark of a true leader. We hope this story has given you some perspective on your own journey. Life is full of challenges, just like the ones Walt faced on that train in 1928. But remember that he was sitting in the dark, with nothing but a notebook, when he found the idea that would save him. Your next great idea might be right around the corner. The philosophy of keep moving forward is perhaps his greatest gift. It is a simple phrase, but it is very powerful. It means that we should not look back at our mistakes for too long. We should focus on what we can do today. We should always be curious and looking for new adventures to explore. As we reach the end of this journey, take a moment to reflect. What is your mouse? What is the small idea that you have been afraid to start? The world needs dreamers who are also doers. The world needs people who are willing to build things that make others happy. It is never too late to begin. The story of Walt Disney is a reminder that our background does not determine our future. A paperboy can become a king of entertainment. A bankrupt artist can build a kingdom. All it takes is the discipline to work hard and the courage to believe in something that others cannot see yet. This is the human story. We thank you for spending this time with us today. These stories of history and character help us understand our own potential. They provide us with the mental tools we need to face our own struggles. Walt's life is a map for anyone who wants to create something lasting and meaningful in this world. If you found this story inspiring, please share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. Our community is built on the shared values of growth and perseverance. We look forward to seeing you in our next story as we continue to explore the lives of the great thinkers and builders. In the end, Walt Disney's life tells us that the most powerful thing in the world is a clear vision. From a simple mouse drawing on a train to a global empire, everything is possible if you never stop moving forward. Thank you for listening, and remember to keep your dreams alive, no matter how small they start.